Hey, what's up? Welcome back to your channel name. This time, we're going to dive into a story that will make you think twice before walking alone at night. Grab some snacks, turn off the lights, and listen closely. Eleanor Blackwood never expected that her journey to the village of Greymoor Hollow would mark the beginning of a nightmare she couldn't escape. She wasn't the type of woman who easily believed in folklore or ghost stories. As an architectural researcher from Oxford, her life had been spent buried in books, ruins, and forgotten buildings. Rationality guided every decision she made. When she received an invitation to study undocumented structures in a remote border village between Scotland and England, her heart raced with excitement. But everything began to change as her rented car entered the outskirts of Greymoor Hollow. Fog blanketed the narrow path, muting the landscape into shades of grey. The village looked like something trapped in a faded photograph. Moss-covered stone houses stood in silence, not a single sign of movement. Eleanor briefly wondered if the place had been abandoned, until she noticed a pair of elderly eyes watching her from behind a curtain. The stare wasn't just curious. It was strained, wary, as if she'd arrived somewhere she shouldn't have. Her accommodation was the old Aldrich house, inherited by Jonathan Aldrich, a middle-aged man with a quiet demeanor. The house itself was the centerpiece of her research, a rare mix of Tudor and Gothic architecture, unusually fused in a way she'd never seen. But when she stepped inside, what she felt wasn't admiration. It was an invisible weight pressing against her chest. The house didn't feel like a home, it felt like a stage waiting for a tragedy to unfold. The house stood at the end of a gravel path, surrounded by rusted iron fences and a garden long overtaken by weeds. Once the proud estate of a prestigious family, Aldrich House had over time become the subject of hushed whispers and wary glances. Eleanor paid no mind to such tales, until she crossed the threshold. The interior was stiflingly dark despite the midday sun. Heavy curtains smothered the tall windows, and the only light came from a dusty chandelier that barely flickered. Narrow corridors stretched into shadows, lined with doors that remained firmly shut, some of them even nailed from the outside. A strange practice for any home. Jonathan had mentioned in passing that certain rooms were too damaged to be used, though his explanation felt rehearsed. The house held on to secrets like dust in the corners, never fully gone, merely waiting. As Eleanor explored, she noticed one spiral staircase leading to the attic, hidden behind a rotting curtain. Something about it seemed wrong. The stairs creaked as if they were resisting her curiosity. Though she tried to stay focused on her architectural observations, her notes gradually shifted from structural details to emotional impressions. Aldrich House didn't feel abandoned or forgotten. It felt awake. And not everything that lives is visible. In the days following her arrival, Eleanor slowly became familiar with the village's residents, though none seemed eager to speak with her. The only one who regularly appeared was an old woman named Mrs. Cowan, who lived in a modest cottage beside the estate. Thin and frail, her eyes were sharp and observant. She spent hours watching Aldrich House through her window, like someone expecting something to happen. One afternoon, as Eleanor was photographing the exterior wall, Mrs. Cowan approached from across the fence. Her voice was soft and trembled as she warned Eleanor not to sleep in the attic room. She insisted the sounds coming from there weren't rats or wind. Eleanor considered it mere superstition, yet there was something deeply sincere in the woman's expression. Her concern wasn't theatrical, it was desperate. One evening, Eleanor saw Mrs. Cowan placing a block of salt near the front gate of the house. She whispered something into the air and disappeared into the night. Eleanor didn't understand the meaning, but from that night on, the soft noises in the house grew louder. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, seemed to drift from upstairs. Whispers with no clear source brushed past her ears when she turned out the lights. The first night Eleanor spent in Aldrich House felt heavier than any place she had stayed before. The stillness was so deep that even the rustling of dry leaves outside echoed like thunder. Around 2 a.m., she awoke to the sound of footsteps directly above her room. The ceiling was the floor of the attic she had yet to explore. The sounds didn't resemble creaks from a settling house. They were clear, deliberate steps, paced as if someone were circling the room. Eleanor's rational mind tried to dismiss it as old wood reacting to changes in temperature, but her pulse betrayed that logic. The next night, the sounds returned. This time, accompanied by a dragging noise. Something heavy, scraping against the attic floor. She sat up, her breath shallow, listening as the noise seemed to move slowly back and forth. When she opened her door, the hallway was completely dark. Not even moonlight bled through the curtains. The house felt submerged in shadow. At sunrise, she finally climbed the attic stairs. Dust covered everything, untouched by time. Yet in the center of the floor, a faint pattern of footprints marred the dust, leading toward the wall where several aged portraits hung crookedly in the gloom. While cleaning one of the study rooms on the second floor, Eleanor discovered an old writing desk jammed shut. After much effort, the drawer finally gave way with a harsh creak. Inside, beneath faded papers and brittle envelopes, she found a heavy iron key. It was cold and rusted, with a letter M intricately carved at its handle. The key seemed out of place, as if belonging not just to a door, but to something older, something meant to be forgotten. Eleanor tucked it into her notebook, unsure why a chill ran down her spine as she did so. She felt drawn to the locked doors in the hallway like never before. Especially one at the end of the corridor, a door that had always resisted her attempts to open it. After the key was found, the atmosphere in the house shifted subtly. The air in the halls grew inexplicably colder, even during sunny afternoons. Small objects, her journal, pens, even her shoes, were found in places she hadn't left them. Windows that had always been closed were suddenly ajar at dawn. And every time she passed the locked door at the end of the hallway, her heart beat faster, like her body was warning her of something her mind wasn't ready to know. Eleanor had resisted the temptation for days, but the pull of the locked door at the end of the hall had grown unbearable. Each time she passed it, she felt watched. Not by someone behind it, but by the door itself. It exuded an unnatural gravity, drawing her closer despite the cold that now settled permanently around it. One morning, driven by restless dreams and the memory of the key marked M, she approached with trembling hands. The key slid in smoothly, as if the door had been waiting for this exact moment. The lock clicked. But the moment she turned the knob, a sharp gust of air burst from inside, smelling of rot and stagnant time. Dust curled outward like smoke. The room was pitch black, even with the corridor behind her brightly lit. As her eyes adjusted, she realized what she was seeing, or rather, what she wasn't. The room was barren. No furniture. No windows. Only a single full-length mirror stood against the far wall, its surface veiled by an aged black cloth. The air inside the room was heavy, thicker than the rest of the house. Her breath fogged in front of her. She didn't dare step in. She only stood in the doorway, staring at the veiled mirror. Something about it throbbed with anticipation. That night, she found her shoes perfectly aligned in front of that door, though she had left them downstairs. The mirror began haunting Eleanor's thoughts. She avoided the room during the day, but at night she dreamed of standing in front of it, removing the cloth slowly, seeing herself, and something else. Something standing just behind her reflection. On the third night after opening the room, her dream bled into waking life. She found herself sleepwalking, standing in front of the door with her hand on the knob, the key still in it. She had never removed the cloth. She swore to herself she never would. But on that night, driven by a force she couldn't explain, she stepped inside the cold, hollow room. As if detached from herself, she reached out and lifted the veil. What stared back at her was herself, at first. Pale, shaken, real. But as she looked deeper, the reflection lingered one breath too long behind her movements. Then it smiled. Eleanor had not. She staggered backward, the cloth falling from her hands. The mirror remained uncovered. That night, the hallway was colder than ever. Her journal pages flipped open on their own, landing on blank pages that slowly filled with ink stains that resembled writing. Unreadable. Shaking. Slanted. Eleanor tried to continue her research, distracting herself with measurements and sketches, but her concentration collapsed under the constant thrum of whispering beneath the floorboards. At first, she thought they were wind currents or mice, but as she listened closely, she could distinguish syllables. Not English. Older. Broken, like forgotten prayers murmured through clenched teeth. The whispers came strongest when she walked past the study, where the mirror was now exposed. The light bulbs flickered each time she neared it. She moved her mattress to the downstairs parlor, unwilling to sleep anywhere near the attic or the mirror. But the whispers followed her. During one sleepless night, she pressed her ear to the floor, heart pounding. Beneath her, beneath the wood, she heard breathing. Slow, ragged, deep breathing. It came and went like waves, sometimes faint, sometimes right beneath her skull. The next morning, the mirror had fogged on the inside. From within the glass, 5 long streaks appeared, like fingers dragged down the surface from inside. One day, while photographing the hallways again to distract herself, Eleanor noticed something deeply wrong. A family portrait that had always shown 6 members, 2 adults and 4 children, now depicted a 7th. A pale woman standing in the far right corner of the painting, where the shadows had previously been. Her dress was unfamiliar, more modern than the rest. But her face was Eleanor's. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, even compared it to an earlier print she had taken with her camera just days ago. The woman wasn't there before. She knew this as surely as she knew her own name. She tore the photo from the wall, heart hammering, but the damage had been done. The line between her and the house was gone. It was inside her now. Or worse, she was becoming part of it. She tried to leave. Packed her things, opened the front door, and found only black fog waiting on the other side. No road. No car. Just a wall of cold mist, impenetrable, suffocating. That night, the house pulsed. The lights surged, then died. The temperature dropped so suddenly that her breath clouded before her. The mirror in the study began to hum, not with sound, but with a deep vibration that rattled through her bones. She knew she had to cover it again, to stop whatever had begun. But as she approached, she saw something waiting in the glass. It was her again. Not the reflection, no. A separate version. Hollow eyes. Smiling. Wearing clothes Eleanor never owned. Standing closer than a reflection should. And behind that figure, dozens more appeared in the mirror's depths. Pale, blurred people pressed to the glass like they were trapped behind it, screaming silently, mouths open wide in agony. Eleanor tried to cover the mirror, but the veil caught fire in her hands, cold fire, blue and slow, that didn't burn her but destroyed the fabric in seconds. The house groaned around her. From every room, doors began to slam. Then open. Then slam again. She collapsed in the hallway as portraits shook on the walls, whispers rising into full screams. In the attic above her, the sound of feet running, dozens of them, pounded the floor. The last thing Eleanor saw before fainting was the mirror's surface warping outward, like water stirred by something rising from beneath. When Eleanor awoke, the house was still. Morning had come, though the light outside remained gray and thin, as if the sun itself refused to shine fully upon the estate. She lay on the floor, body aching, unsure how long she'd been unconscious. The only thing she clearly remembered was the mirror stretching, as if something had tried to break through. As she pulled herself up, her eyes fell on the wooden floorboards near the study. In the dust that had gathered overnight, something had been drawn. It wasn't random. A name. Her name. Not written by her. The strokes were jagged, reversed, as if drawn from inside the mirror, mirrored handwriting spelling out Eleanor over and over again. Hundreds of times, barely visible, filling the walls, the floor, even her own reflection in nearby glass panels. Wherever she turned, her name followed her like a haunting echo. And then she noticed one more word, beneath her name, scrawled larger and deeper: return. Eleanor could no longer deny it. Something in the house was aware of her. Worse, it knew her. As the hours dragged on, the temperature dropped further, and the air grew heavy with the scent of mildew and something metallic. The mirror remained uncovered, now cracked slightly at one corner, as if resisting whatever force stirred behind it. Then came the voices. Not whispers now, but actual voices, though still just outside full understanding. She'd hear them clearest at twilight, when the light bent unnaturally through the attic window. They echoed down the stairs in slow, overlapping cadence. Pleading. Accusing. Mocking. Some said her name. Others spoke in tongues older than English. One voice, deeper than the rest, repeated the same phrase again and again: she must remember. Eleanor couldn't eat. She barely drank. Her hands trembled constantly, and she found new scratches on her skin each morning, as if someone had clawed at her while she slept. She tried to burn sage, play calming music, even pray aloud. The house laughed in return. Not with sound, but with creaks and shifting shadows that responded like a living thing. Desperate for answers, Eleanor dug through the remaining boxes left by the estate agency, forgotten documents, yellowed letters, and brittle photographs. In one manila folder marked Archive, 1893, she found a photo that shattered her remaining grip on reason. It was a picture of the house, taken more than a century ago. Standing on the front porch was a woman with sharp cheekbones, a severe expression, and unmistakable eyes. Her eyes. Not just similar, identical. And next to the woman stood a tall man in a waistcoat, holding a journal that looked eerily similar to hers. Around them stood 3 children, faces blurred, smeared as if the photograph had refused to capture them properly. On the back of the photo, written in faded cursive, was a single sentence: she returns when the mirror calls. Eleanor dropped the photo and backed away. She hadn't just found the house. She'd come back to it. The mirror became louder each night, emitting not just hums, but low rumbles that vibrated the entire structure. Doors swung open on their own. The chandelier in the foyer swayed though the air remained still. And from the study, light began to spill out even when the door was closed, cold, silvery light that stung Eleanor's eyes. She knew what had to be done. She retrieved an old hammer from the shed and stood before the mirror once more. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the glass. Her reflection looked exhausted, hollow. Behind it, shadowy figures now pressed their hands to the other side, watching her intently. She raised the hammer. The moment it struck, the mirror exploded outward with no sound, shards flying like ice, but vanishing into dust before they touched the floor. A deafening silence followed. Not peace, only a void, deep and ancient. In the place where the mirror once stood, a door revealed itself. Not made of wood or metal, but of stone, carved into the shape of a sealed crypt. Etchings covered it, matching the language from the whispers. Eleanor didn't open it. Not yet. That night, Eleanor sat in the hallway, back against the wall, watching the stone door. The house seemed to inhale and exhale now, groaning with each slow breath. From behind the door, she no longer heard voices, but movement. Wet, dragging sounds. Shuffling. As if something had finally stirred after sleeping for 100 years. She flipped open her journal to document what had happened, only to find every page already filled. Not by her. The entries described every moment she had lived in the house so far, accurate to the second. Then they continued, into the future. Descriptions of events she hadn't yet experienced. Her own reactions. Her final moments. She closed the book. In the corner of her eye, the shadows shifted again. The house was no longer haunted. It had awakened. And Eleanor, now fully claimed, could no longer leave. That was our story for tonight. Do you think it's just an ordinary tale, or is there something more to it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next stories. See you, if you still dare to watch next time.